Jason had never imagined the sky could look like this. It was not the familiar blue of Earth, nor the soft orange of a sunset he loved. The clouds twisted unnaturally, painted in green, violet, and silver. Lightning didn't strike, it flowed slowly like liquid fire, illuminating strange towers that pierced the clouds. He had been walking home from work, exhausted and thinking about a quiet dinner, when the world around him suddenly changed. One moment he was on the sidewalk of his quiet town, the next, invisible hands lifted him off the ground. A bright, blinding light surrounded him. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. Then he felt it, the ship. It was enormous, far bigger than any building he had ever seen. Its surface pulsed and shimmered like living metal. Inside, the air was thick, smelling both sweet and sharp, like alien flowers and electricity mixed together. Jason struggled against the invisible force holding him, but it was useless. Panic clawed at his chest. And then he saw her. The alien queen. She stood at the far end of the chamber, tall and impossibly regal. Her skin was silver blue, shimmering under the strange lights, and her eyes glowed gold like twin suns. Her hair floated around her, as if underwater, moving with a life of its own. Jason felt small, insignificant, like a mouse in a cathedral. He realized immediately. She had complete power here, and he was nothing. "You are mine now," she said. Her voice was calm, but it shook him to the core. It wasn't just sound, it felt like it touched his bones. "You will obey." Jason's heart raced. Fear poured through him, but strangely so did anger. Not the kind of anger that made you yell. It was quiet, stubborn, the kind that whispers, "I will not break so easily." He swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath. The queen approached. Every step she took made the floor vibrate slightly. Jason noticed her claws were sharp, gleaming under the strange light. But there was also something else, a grace, a presence that made him want to look away even as he stared. He realized she wasn't just a monster, she was a being of unimaginable power and somehow awe-inspiring. "You are fragile," she said, examining him. "Yet I sense a spark. Why do you resist?" Jason opened his mouth, but fear froze his words. Instead, he just stared, feeling small, cornered. She tilted her head, and for a fraction of a second, her golden eyes softened. That tiny flicker of emotion terrified him more than her anger could. Days passed, or maybe hours. Time was strange aboard the alien ship. He was placed in a chamber that glowed softly, walls moving as if breathing. They brought him food, water, things he couldn't even identify but never asked if he wanted them. Every corner of the palace felt alive, as if the building itself was watching. Jason began to feel the weight of loneliness pressing down on him. He was a stranger in an alien world, a prisoner who could not escape, and the queen's gaze followed him everywhere. Yet amidst the terror, something strange began to grow inside him. He noticed details others might miss. The way the queen's hair floated, the way she paused for a moment before making decisions, the way her golden eyes sometimes seemed thoughtful instead of commanding. He realized that even someone so powerful had moments of hesitation. He clung to that thought like a lifeline. One night, unable to sleep, Jason spoke quietly, almost to himself. "I'm human," he whispered, "and I don't give up." He didn't know if the queen could hear him, but deep inside he felt it mattered, not just for survival but for something more. A stubborn spark of courage, tiny and fragile, began to burn. He did not yet know what would come, but he swore, quietly and fiercely, that he would not let himself disappear. The alien queen had taken him, stripped him of freedom, and placed him in a world that seemed impossible to survive. Yet, for the first time, Jason realized that maybe, just maybe, humans were not meant to be small. Not in the way the universe could see, and perhaps not even in the eyes of an alien queen. Jason's days on the alien queen's ship had settled into a strange, unbearable rhythm. He awoke to alien light that seemed to hum, casting long shadows over walls that pulsed like living veins. Guards with glowing eyes escorted him through the palace corridors. He carried strange tools, cleaned chambers that shimmered with energy, and obeyed commands he barely understood. Each task was exhausting, but each task reminded him he was alive, and that he was under the watchful gaze of the alien queen. He hated her at first, not because she had captured him, but because she was perfection itself, a being that made humans seem small, weak, and fragile. Every command she gave was precise, every motion elegant, every word sharp and controlling. And yet, there were moments Jason noticed, fleeting glimpses that made him question what he felt. Sometimes, when she walked through the palace halls, she would pause and stare at something distant, her golden eyes softening as if she remembered something she wished she could forget. Jason began to observe her carefully, secretly. Humans had learned to survive by noticing small details. The curve of her smile when she thought no one watched, the way her fingers trembled slightly when handling delicate items, the brief pause before she spoke when she was unsure. These were human moments hidden beneath alien perfection, and Jason clung to them. They reminded him that even she had vulnerabilities. He learned their language slowly. At first it was harsh and alien to his ears, each syllable like metal scraping against metal. But Jason was stubborn. He repeated words, listened to conversations, mimicked sounds. The guards mocked him sometimes, calling him weak, fragile, useless. Yet each insult hardened him in some way. He would not bow, not in spirit, even if his body obeyed. One day, while carrying a glowing container through the halls, Jason accidentally tripped. The container clattered to the floor, spilling a strange liquid that sizzled and hissed. Panic filled him. He turned to face, fully expecting punishment. But instead of anger, she simply raised an elegant hand and stopped the guards, her golden eyes fixed on him, not with rage but curiosity. "You are reckless," she said, voice calm yet piercing. "Yet you survive." Jason's chest tightened. He wasn't sure if he should speak. Finally, he said quietly, "I'm human, we survive." Tilted her head, studying him. That pause, that moment, lingered in Jason's mind. No one had ever dared speak to her like that without trembling, yet he had. Fear still trembled in him, but so did pride. Perhaps she saw something in humans that others ignored. Persistence, stubbornness, the ability to fight even when hopeless. As weeks passed, the palace began to feel less like a prison and more like a world he had to navigate. He began to understand the rhythms of the queen's life. He noticed the guards' shifts, the patterns of the glowing doors, the ways the ship reacted to his commands. He became useful, not through obedience alone, but through observation and courage. And slowly, he began to notice the queen differently. When she moved through the palace gardens, tending alien plants that glowed softly in the dark, her expression softened. She sometimes hummed in a way that reminded him of lullabies on Earth. Jason realized that even someone so powerful needed connection, needed presence, needed someone to see them as more than a ruler or conqueror. Late at night, when the palace quieted, Jason would sit in a corner of his chamber, whispering to himself, "I will survive. I will endure." He did not yet know what that would mean in this alien world. But for the first time, fear was joined by another feeling, a strange, growing curiosity and maybe respect. He was a slave. He was human. And in this strange, glowing palace, he realized that being human was not just about strength or survival. It was about stubbornness, about noticing the small things, about holding on to who you were even when everything around you screamed otherwise. And in the quiet moments when the alien queen passed his chamber, he swore he saw the flicker of something else, something like interest, or perhaps something like admiration. Jason had survived the first trials of being a slave, but he knew, deep in his heart, that survival was only the beginning. Jason had grown accustomed to the rhythms of the palace, but he never expected the queen to approach him voluntarily. It happened one evening when the corridors glowed faintly with the soft green light of the alien garden. Was there, standing near a cluster of luminescent plants that swayed without wind. The garden seemed alive, but it was quiet in a way that made Jason's chest tighten. He stopped in his tracks, unsure if he should retreat or speak. "Why do you always resist me?" asked suddenly, her voice low and almost hesitant. Jason froze. He hadn't expected conversation, much less a question directed at him personally. He looked at her, startled by the soft undertone in her golden eyes, a tone he had never heard before. "Because I'm human," Jason said finally, his voice calm despite the fear. "We resist. It's what we do." Tilted her head, considering him. Her gaze was intense, but not threatening. For the first time, she didn't give a command or a warning. She simply observed him, as if trying to understand something she had never known. Jason noticed the faint tension in her shoulders, the way her hands hovered near the glowing leaves as if unsure whether to touch them. "You are strange," she said at last, almost a whisper. "Not like the others, you feel." Jason swallowed hard. He had survived countless days of fear, hunger, and endless tasks, but this moment made his chest pound in a different way, something new, fragile, and surprising. He realized she was not just powerful, she was lonely. And maybe, just maybe, he could see a side of her no one else ever had. Over the next days, their encounters grew. Sometimes she allowed him to walk beside her in the garden. Other times they exchanged words while he performed tasks, quiet, simple sentences about Earth, about humans, about the small joys of life. Seemed to listen more attentively than anyone Jason had ever met. He learned that even beings who controlled worlds could be curious, even vulnerable in ways that mattered. Jason found himself laughing quietly at her odd expressions when she tried to imitate human gestures. For her part, seemed both amused and slightly puzzled at his stubborn courage. She tested him in small ways, asking questions she already knew the answers to, watching how he responded. Each time he spoke honestly, even when it might have earned him punishment. One night Jason noticed her standing alone in the garden, staring at the soft glow of a flowering vine. He approached carefully, unsure if she would allow him near. "It's beautiful," he said quietly, pointing to the glowing leaves. She did not speak for a long moment. Then, in a voice so soft it barely carried, she said, "Do humans find beauty in such fragile things?" Jason smiled faintly. "Yes, we do. We notice the small things because they remind us we are alive. They remind us of hope." His eyes softened, the golden glow dimming slightly as if she understood something she had never realized. She didn't command him to leave. She didn't assert her power. For the first time, she allowed Jason to stand beside her as an equal, not as a slave, not as an object, but as someone who mattered. From that evening on, Jason's fear began to shift into something more complex. He respected her power, but he also saw her loneliness, her curiosity, and the tiny cracks in her alien perfection. He realized that connection could grow even in impossible places. And though he did not yet understand the full consequences of their bond, he felt a fragile hope that even a human could touch the heart of an alien queen. Jason had survived as a slave. Now, for the first time, he sensed the possibility of something greater, a glimmer of connection, born from courage, honesty, and a shared curiosity about life itself. The palace was quiet, but Jason sensed the tension in the air. He had been moving quietly through the corridors, carrying a tray of glowing vials when a sudden alarm echoed through the ship. The lights flickered violently and the walls trembled. Jason froze, his heart pounding. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. A rival alien faction had breached the outer defenses. They were not like the Queen's people. They were brutal, violent, and cunning. Jason saw guards rushing past him, their glowing weapons raised, shouting orders he barely understood. Panic threatened to take him over, but he forced himself to stay calm. For the first time, he realized that running would not save anyone. He turned toward the Queen's chambers where was calmly observing the chaos. Calm but unprepared. Her eyes, usually golden and confident, flickered with uncertainty. Jason's chest tightened. This was the moment when fear could either break him or define him. He shouted to the guards, pointing at entrances they had left unguarded, suggesting positions they might take to block the attackers. At first, they ignored him, but his voice carried urgency and authority. Slowly, they began to follow his directions. Jason moved swiftly, guiding them, using strategies he had learned from years of reading and playing games on Earth that taught him tactics and observation. The attackers burst into the chamber. Jason stood in their path, not strong like the guards, but fearless. His presence shocked them. They had not expected resistance from a mere human. With quick thinking, he knocked over glowing pillars to block entrances, tripped attackers with careful precision, and called out instructions to the guards. Watched silently, her golden eyes widening. She had always commanded, but she had never been saved. Never needed someone to act decisively without orders. And now, this fragile human was shaping the battlefield with courage and intelligence she could not deny. When the last of the attackers was driven back, the palace quieted once more. Jason leaned against a wall, breathing hard, sweat and adrenaline coursing through him. He had never felt more alive and more terrified. He glanced at, unsure of how she would react. Instead of anger, she approached him slowly. "You risked yourself to protect me," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "I thought humans were fragile. I thought you would break under fear." Jason swallowed. His hands were still trembling, but he spoke steadily. "I'm human," he said simply. "We survive. We fight even when it seems impossible." For the first time, the expression softened. She did not smile, not yet, but her golden eyes held something Jason had never seen before: respect. And more than respect, a recognition that humans, despite their apparent weakness, carried a strength she could not easily understand. From that day forward, Jason's position changed. He was no longer just a slave carrying out orders. He was someone whose opinion mattered, someone whose courage had earned him a place in the Queen's regard. The guards no longer sneered at him. They watched him with cautious curiosity. And the alien queen began to allow him into her world in ways she had never done for anyone before. That night, Jason stood in the garden once more, looking up at the alien sky. The same twisted colors, the same strange clouds, yet everything felt different. He had survived fear, chaos, and death. He had acted when no one else could. And for the first time, he realized something profound. Sometimes being human was not about strength or size. It was about courage, quick thinking, and the willingness to act when it mattered most. Joined him silently, her presence near but not imposing. Jason felt no fear now, only a quiet connection that neither of them fully understood. She looked at him with those golden eyes, and he knew that the events of that day had changed everything. The alien queen had seen the heart of a human, and the human had shown the power of courage in a world that seemed impossible to survive. Jason had saved her life, and in doing so, he had begun to earn a place not just in the palace, but in her world and maybe in her heart. Days turned into weeks, and the palace seemed quieter now, but not empty. Jason moved with purpose, no longer just a slave, but someone who had earned the Queen's cautious trust, had begun to speak to him more often, not just to give orders, but to share thoughts, questions, and sometimes small moments of curiosity. Jason noticed the change in her voice, softened, less commanding, more thoughtful. It happened first in the garden. Jason had been walking among the glowing plants, observing their gentle sway, when appeared, silent as the air itself. She did not approach him aggressively, did not order him to stop or speak. She simply stood beside him, watching. "You talk about Earth often," she said softly. "Your world, it seems fragile, yet you call it home." Jason smiled faintly. "It is fragile," he said, "but humans find ways to keep going. We survive, we laugh, we love, even when things seem impossible." His golden eyes lingered on him. She had never known this, never understood the quiet strength of a human, the ability to endure and still cherish life. She listened as he spoke about small things: sunsets, the smell of rain, laughter shared with friends. Jason realized she was learning, and more importantly, she was opening herself to something new. Their conversations grew. Jason began to notice the subtle ways she changed in his presence. She allowed him into her chambers, asked his opinion on matters that were once beyond his concern, even lingered near him in silence, simply watching the glow of the palace lights. Something that had seemed impossible, The bridge between human and alien was slowly forming. Then came the moment that changed everything. One day summoned him to a quiet chamber filled with soft light. The air was warm, scented with alien flowers, and Jason felt his heart race. She spoke carefully, deliberately. "I want to create life," she said. Her words were not a question, not an order, just a statement. Jason froze. "You want me to help?" he asked, unsure if he understood. "Yes," she said. "I want a partner, someone who can guide, who can teach, who can care." Jason's chest tightened. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him, heavier than anything he had ever carried. He looked into her eyes and saw no deception, no coercion, only a strange trust. I will do my best," he said, his voice steady despite the fear and awe swirling inside him. From that day, their relationship shifted in ways neither of them could have predicted. Allowed him to guide her through rituals, to teach her patience, to share stories of love, family, and humanity. Jason's human heart became a bridge between worlds. He nurtured her curiosity, encouraged her laughter, and taught her the value of empathy. Time passed. Life in the palace became a mixture of alien traditions and human moments. They tended to glowing plants together, shared meals that Jason had learned to adapt to, and spoke of dreams for the future. Slowly, they formed a family, not bound by duty alone, but by trust, understanding, and an unexpected bond that neither could have imagined. When the first child arrived, Jason held them gently, feeling warmth and love unlike anything he had ever known. The child was a mix of human and alien, fragile yet radiant, small yet full of potential. Watched him, her golden eyes glimmering with something he could not name, pride, joy, maybe even love. Jason realized in that quiet moment that life had shifted completely. He had been a slave, a human caught in a world that seemed impossible to survive. Now he was a teacher, a partner, and a father. His courage, patience, and humanity had shaped a new life, one that belonged to both worlds. And as he looked at the queen and the child, Jason understood something profound. Survival was only the beginning. Love, trust, and courage could create something far stronger than fear. Even in the heart of an alien empire, a human heart could build a new world. Life in the palace had changed in ways Jason could never have imagined. The once silent halls now echoed with laughter, cries, and tiny footsteps. The children were unlike anything he had ever known, half human, half alien, with glowing eyes and abilities that earthed logic. They could lift objects with a thought, move faster than any human, and sense emotions in ways that were startling. Yet, for all their power, they struggled to understand the world around them. Jason became their anchor. Each day he taught them patience, empathy, and the simple human joys he had known. The feel of sunlight on skin, the taste of water on a hot day, the comfort of a gentle touch. Sometimes he read them stories of Earth, of courage, love, and resilience. They listened intently, their golden and silver eyes wide with wonder, as if absorbing not just the words, but the human heart itself. Watched him silently at first, observing how he nurtured the children. She had expected him to fail, to be too fragile, too limited by his human nature. But day by day, she saw something she could not deny. His humanity was a strength, not a weakness. He could teach patience, he could inspire courage, he could love unconditionally. The challenges were many. One day, the eldest child lifted a heavy object with a thoughtless gesture, nearly injuring a guard. Jason intervened calmly but firmly. "Power without control is dangerous," he said, guiding the child's hand gently. "Strength is not just what you can do, it's how you choose to use it." The child looked at him, eyes glowing, and for a moment Jason saw understanding, a seed of wisdom taking root. Another time, the children became frightened by a storm outside the palace. Lightning danced unnaturally across the alien sky, and they huddled together, trembling. Jason held them close, whispering stories of bravery and hope. "Even when the sky rages, we can stay calm inside," he said. Slowly, their fear eased, replaced by trust in his presence. Notice the subtle changes in her children and in herself. She had always believed power alone could guide her people, but Jason had shown her that love and patience could shape not just minds, but hearts. She began to trust his judgments, his methods, and even his quiet, stubborn way of seeing the world. Despite the difficulties, joy blossomed in the palace. The children's laughter filled the corridors, their questions sparked curiosity and Jason found a new sense of purpose he had never felt on Earth. He was no longer just surviving, he was teaching, guiding, and shaping life itself. Yet challenges were never far away. The children's alien abilities attracted attention, both from allies and rivals. Jason had to protect them, not just with strength, but with strategy, foresight, and patience. Each day was a balance of nurturing and guarding, of guiding and defending. It was exhausting, but Jason welcomed it, knowing that every lesson, every moment of care was shaping a future that was bigger than himself. One evening, as the glowing moons rose over the alien city, Jason sat within the garden, the children asleep nearby. "I never thought humans could do this," said softly, her golden eyes reflecting moonlight. "You've given them something I could not teach." Jason smiled, tired but fulfilled. "It's just human heart," he said simply. "We have a way of holding on, even when it seems impossible, even when everything around us is strange." Reached for his hand, a gesture of trust and connection. "I see now," she whispered. "Your humanity, it is more powerful than I imagined." Jason looked at the sleeping children, their small chests rising and falling, glowing softly in the alien light. For the first time, he truly understood his place, not just as a human in an alien world, not just as a teacher, but as a father. The bond he had built with and the children was stronger than fear, stronger than power, stronger than survival. In the quiet of the palace night, Jason realized that being human was not about strength alone. It was about love, patience, and the courage to guide the next generation, no matter how strange the world around them might be. He had survived as a slave, he had connected with a queen, and now he was shaping the future of an entire new lineage. Years had passed since Jason had first been captured. The palace, once cold and silent, now pulsed with life. His children, half human, half alien, had grown strong, curious, and wise in ways neither world could fully predict. The halls echoed with their laughter, their questions, and the tiny sounds of discovery. Jason had watched them learn, stumble, and rise again, and with each moment he felt the weight and wonder of his role more deeply. He stood in the palace garden, the same place where he had first glimpsed softer side, where fear had given way to understanding, and understanding had grown into trust. The glowing plants swayed gently in the alien breeze, casting soft lights on his face. One of his children ran past him, chasing a floating orb of light, and Jason's lips curved into a tired, yet full smile. Appeared silently beside him. She was taller now, regal as ever, yet her golden eyes reflected pride, warmth, and something far more human than Jason had ever imagined seeing in her. She reached out, brushing a strand of his hair back from his forehead, a simple gesture that spoke volumes. "You changed everything," she said softly. "Our people, my children, they are alive because of you." Jason shook his head, a faint laugh escaping him. "I didn't do it alone," he said. "They taught me just as much as I taught them, and you allowed me to help. You trusted me when no one else would." Looked at him, a mixture of admiration and affection in her gaze. "I thought humans were weak, fragile, easily broken. I see now that they are anything but. You carried courage, patience, and love in a way that shaped life itself." Jason swallowed, feeling emotion rise in his chest. It had been years of fear, struggle, and uncertainty. He had been a captive, a slave, a stranger in a world that seemed impossible. And yet, through courage, connection, and humanity, he had carved a place not just for himself, but for a legacy that bridged worlds. One of the children ran up, tugging at his hand. "Father, show me again," they exclaimed, pointing at a floating orb of energy. Jason laughed, lifting them up onto his shoulders. "All right," he said, letting them guide him through a game of skill and concentration. The child's laughter rang out, blending perfectly with the hum of the alien city beyond the palace walls. Watched them silent for a moment, then said, "You have given them something I could not just life but guidance, not just protection but love." Jason looked at her, understanding the weight of her words. He had begun as a human caught in chains, an outsider in a world that seemed impossible to navigate. And yet, by refusing to surrender his humanity, by holding on to courage, empathy, and care, he had become something more than he could have imagined. A teacher, a protector, a father, and in a way, a partner to the most powerful being in the galaxy. The glowing moons rose higher in the sky, casting soft silver light over the garden. Jason placed his hand over his heart, feeling the pulse of life around him, the children, and even himself. He realized that legacy was not built on power or fear. It was built on love, on patience, on courage when the world expected you to falter. It was built on being human in the most impossible of circumstances. Leaned her head lightly on his shoulder. "We are fortunate," she whispered, "all of us because of you." Jason smiled, tired but fulfilled. "No," he said gently, "we are all fortunate because we chose to survive, because we chose to care, because we chose each other." In that quiet moment, surrounded by glowing plants, soft lights, and the laughter of children, Jason understood the truth of it all. He had been a slave. He had been terrified. But he had endured, and in doing so, he had created life, love, and a future that spanned worlds. He was human. He had fought with his heart, and that heart had become a legacy. And for the first time since he had been captured, Jason felt complete. The alien queen had taken a human as her slave. But through courage, empathy, and the stubbornness of humanity, that human had become the father of her children, the bridge between worlds, and the heart of a new, extraordinary future.